Welcome to the Teach Joyfully podcast, where we talk about all things elementary teaching with some mom stuff thrown in. I'm Lisa Burns, a teacher success coach, veteran elementary teacher, and mom of 5. I'll be your host. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, my friends, I am here today with a very special guest. Her name is Connie Gatlin. She is a veteran teacher with a master's degree in elementary education and Montessori training, whose teaching journey took a very unexpected turn during COVID, when it became evident that the private school that she worked for was tragically not going to reopen. So welcome, Connie. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited too.
So thanks for agreeing to be on the show and share your teaching pivot. So let's just dive right on in. So you've been teaching for a long time and COVID hit. Like all of us, we all had to adapt, right? Everyone scrambled. We had to figure it out. But your journey was a little different than a lot of other people's journey. And I do know other people who did this, but it's not quite as common. So let's start with how things changed for you that spring.
Okay. Well, so in March, a week before spring break, everything closed down. We found out actually on a Friday. Friday was our half day at the school. So at about 11 o'clock, we were told, you're not opening on Monday. So we had an hour to get everything out to parents that this was it. So it closed down. At that time, nobody knew. We thought we'd have 3 weeks of spring break instead of 2. And then as things started happening, it was going to be evident that we weren't reopening in person. And so the owners of the school said, we need to meet with you. And I said, okay, but I just brought my daughter home from Madrid. And so because of that, then I was in an extra long quarantine because she was coming to my house, coming from Madrid, where it was a very hot spot. So I had to be in quarantine for 2 weeks. So that took an extra week, and they weren't making any announcements until then. So parents were emailing me through going through Class Dojo, what's going on, and I had no idea. So when I met with them after I could get out of quarantine, they said, we've decided we're going to retire. That we just can't handle we just don't know how to handle going virtual. They're in their late 70s, and they just didn't really, I hate to say this, but didn't really understand the virtual world. And they said, so we're going to just say, nope, we're not coming back. And they said, but if you want to, they were nonprofit. They said, we'll talk. They were renting from a church, the facility. We'll talk to them, see what's going on. And to be really honest, they had a preschool, and preschool is not my thing. So, we all have that grade level that we love to teach. Preschool isn't it. Yes, have all my childhood units. I have all my Montessori training, but preschool's not my thing. And I said, no, preschool's not my thing. So I had to think about what to do. But in the meantime, parents, because they knew I had the meeting, are saying, okay, what's going on? I said, well, they're not reopening. I made the announcement. I had to make the announcement to all the parents. And luckily I was in charge of Class Dojo, so I could, for my school, so I could do that. And I said, they're not reopening. And parents, well, what are we going to do for the rest of the year? Actually, they said, what are you going to do for the rest of the year? And I said, okay, let's try this. In the quarantine time, I'd been researching what teachers were doing. So those parents who wanted me to continue in elementary, we just kind of felt our way around Google Classroom and different websites and how to do things, and finished out the school year.
Okay, so here you are, and you figured it out like everyone else. We all scrambled. We all had to figure stuff out and figure out, okay, what am I doing? Some of us had like a more of a comfort level with Zoom already. Other people did not. And so there was just, everyone's learning curve was different.
Right.
And other people had, everyone had a different learning curve with each particular platform too. So whether you were using Google Classroom already, or you weren't using Google Classroom, or you were using Seesaw, or any of those things, everyone was in a different boat and having to figure things out. Thankfully, one of the things that I found was that teachers were sharing online actively on what was working for them, what they were doing, how to do it, so that other teachers could come in and really benefit from that. And that was one of the beautiful things about that time period, was how generous and really wonderful teachers were to each other, which honestly is amazing and wonderful, that teachers were just so willing to share what they were doing, because it really was helpful because you can't be an expert in everything.
No.
And so all of us had something to learn. And so we could all pick up something new and learn something new. And so here we were, and you get through this time. So you're coming to the end of the school year and you still no longer have a school. So what did you do?
So we went all the way till mid-June then. And as it was coming towards the end of June, we're all, I don't know about other areas, but here they still didn't know, are we opening schools? Are we not opening schools? What's going to happen? And in my area, they have been working on a year-round schedule, which means school's supposed to start in July, mid-July.
Oh my, so you were a year-round school. So this was something that was imminent. It was coming up much faster than it was for other schools. Interesting.
So I'm looking, I keep going on to the school district, the local school district's website. It's not being real helpful. I don't know. And parents are, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? So I said, okay, people have been telling me for years I should start my own school. So I said, okay, I'll start my own school. So I made all these, I looked into how to do this. I jumped through all the hoops, which wasn't as easy. Well, it's never easy, but when you have to make appointments to do certain things, because, you can't, they can only allow a couple of people in a room. So I had, at City Hall and all these things in order to start my own private school now. And I had to figure out how to do that. So within that 4-week time period, I said, okay, I'm starting a school. I didn't know what was going to happen, so I just went with the year-round calendar. Turns out the schools in this area decided not to, but I'd already made the announcement, and I didn't want to go back on that to my parents. So I started in July. We started virtual. I really did research, like you said, thank goodness for certain Facebook groups to share resources, to do all that. And so I did all the things I was supposed to do, fictitious business name. Because we're virtual, I had to do home occupation permit, all that stuff, got all that stuff done. You can't register in California with the Department of Education till October, but I started, and then as soon as I could, the very first day, I registered with the Department of Education and made schedules for my class. It's very small. Our private school was small anyway. And some parents decided, no, they thought when school opened, in September, schools were going to open, which didn't happen. They were all virtual, but they said, we're going to still try public. So I ended up with a very, very small class. I actually also ended up with some students from San Jose, which is about 5 hours away, 7 hours away, something in there. And then, but their private school was going to open. So once they opened, I lost those students. But so, I just did it. Since we're small, I give one-on-one time to the students. I give office hours. While I still let the standards guide me, I also, because it's mine, I feel I can teach in a manner that I feel is really beneficial to the students.
Yeah.
So especially that
leeway, right? You have a lot of leeway when it's a private school and it's your school.
Yes.
There's a lot of leeway as long as you're hitting all of the things that need to be taught. Right. There's a lot of leeway in how you go about doing that, isn't there? And a lot of freedom. And as a teacher, that's one of the things I know as a teacher for me. And I talk to so many teachers. That's one of the things that so many teachers feel like is being taken away from them in many places simply because there's so many regulations now.
Yes.
And the freedom to actually really teach the way you want to teach varies depending on where you are in the country, what school district you're in. It varies widely across the nation, and that's something that to gain that back is a real gift, isn't it?
Oh, it is. One of the things that I enjoy, I've always taught in small private schools, so I've always had combination classes. And this last year I was combination 2nd through 4th grade. And so that's why my school K through 5, I can, since I don't have a whole lot of students, I can teach to each student individually and still group them for certain things. But because we're online, there's a lot that doesn't take my time. Like if a student needs help, I can work one-on-one with a student without being interrupted. And then I can go on and work one-on-one with another student without being interrupted. And it just, I feel like I'm getting so much more teaching done.
Isn't that interesting? And I've heard that from other teachers. There's teachers who have just loved being online, and there are students who have loved being online.
Yes.
And it has caught them by surprise. It's not something they ever thought of or considered. And now they're in this environment and they're thinking, I think this is where we want to stay. Whereas there's plenty of students and plenty of teachers who have said, oh, the second I can get back into my classroom,
Yes.
I am back. And absolutely, there is a place for everyone. And I think that's part of why I really wanted to have you on the show, is because there is a place for everyone. And this is something that it doesn't have to be your own school. There are lots of teachers out there, I know in my area, who have actually homeschooled other people's students.
Yes.
So in small groups. So they might have a group of 2nd graders who are being homeschooled, but they're homeschooling and they're listed as the person who is overseeing.
Right.
And so there are lots of names for this kind of schooling: micro schooling, pod schooling, cohorts. There's all kinds of different names out there for them. But as opposed to going through all the formality of opening an actual school, there's other options to do something very similar, isn't there?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have in-person Fridays. I call it STEM in the Park. And so we go to a park and we have STEM class. We do an art lesson. I read a book. We do a STEM activity based on it. And then we do another science wow experiment. They play with each other. We have PE. So they are still getting that time together. And for that, then in Southern California, for homeschooling, you register with a charter group. And so for that, I'm registered with a charter. So any homeschool parent then can go to that charter and say, we want to do STEM in the Park on Fridays with Catalyst Academy. And then so they can say, oh, okay, yes, she's registered with us and we can do that.
That's cool. So that's cool. The other students can join in then too. So if they have friends or are doing other forms of schooling, then they can certainly join in.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. So tell me a little bit about your schedule. So you're not teaching, you're teaching the lessons, but you're not doing everything with all the students. They're actually doing a lot of the work at home on their own. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
So how did you manage this? Because you had multi-grade, which happens in schools anyway,
Right. Yes.
but
Yes.
you're doing online. And so how did you manage? What did your schedule look like?
So for I call them primary, my K1 students, we would meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 for a Zoom meeting. I'd go over social studies, and on Thursday we had art, which was using Art Hub for Kids, greatest directed drawing videos ever. And we do art, we do social studies, we do science activities. We wouldn't during that time really do reading and math because they were so different. So we would do those activities, different things, whatever topic we were on for those. And then for them, I also, because they are young and saying, oh, I'll have an hour one-on-one with you is really long, then I would have a half hour one-on-one on Monday and Wednesday. So they were on Zoom every day, but not a long time. And those one-on-ones is when we would focus on math and reading.
So it was very directed teaching for whatever their needs were. So you could level them however you needed to, not necessarily by grade. And then it sounds like you were, they were going on from there. They have assignments to do and they would go off and do their assignments. And then you said that you did office hours. So that was a time they could drop in and get help if they needed more.
Yes, anybody could drop in every day, Monday through Thursday, because Friday was our half day where we did our STEM in the park activities. And so anybody could drop in for office hours. For my older kids, my second through, at that time I only had fourth, this year I'll have a fifth grader. For my older kids, it was very similar, but they would meet Monday and Wednesday for science and social studies and some grammar lessons, because you can always, every year you can do alliteration and all the ELA topics. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays after my primary, I do literature with them. We'd be reading, we'd be questioning, doing all those. And I'm very, I love project-based learning. So they would also get, for some of the social studies and science topics, they would get an assignment, know when the due date was. And their assignments throughout the week were kind of guiding them how to cite sources, how to look up appropriate information, guiding them so that they could pull that all together to present. And they'd present on Zoom, or they'd present at Friday STEM in the park in front of the group. And so they all had one day a week, because they can go an hour of one-on-one focused on math and reading. And then they could also drop in for office hours. But every day they'd get a math lesson. And if I felt, oh, this might be tough for them, I would record a video lesson. So when they got it, they could watch the video.
Got it. So you're kind of figuring things out as you went, and you're being very flexible about how to meet their needs along the way. Very good. Awesome. So as you're thinking about this, are you planning on doing the same thing next year then?
Yes, we are going to continue the same next year. Unfortunately, I will lose only one student, because parents had to go back to work, and they are just devastated that they're going to lose me. They did have her tested in a public school arena by a relative who does that for the public schools. And they said, oh no, you've got to leave her with this teacher next year. And they said, we can't. She's not old enough to stay home by herself. And so they're having to put her somewhere else. But the rest are coming back. They like the flexibility, because some families like to be able to, who own their own businesses and stuff, can take vacations at other times, but their students can still log on, can still complete the work.
Right.
And it's very flexible for them.
Yeah, that's right. There's lots of reasons why people like those kinds of schedules, for sure. So what do you think, as far as benefits go? What do you think about benefits for you, and then benefits for the students too? What did you see?
Well, benefits for me is I did get to teach the way I feel is best. And also part of that goes into the fact that, like I mentioned before, I could complete a lesson without, I need help with this, Mrs. Gatlin. I need help with this, Mrs. Gatlin. All the, interruptions that would come, especially since I've always taught multi-levels. I can be working with a group, but if another group, oh, wait, we're stumbling, let's get help right now. And so that was a benefit for me, that I felt I could really complete lessons. And I think that's a benefit for the children too, that they get the lesson from beginning to end without interruption. So, and one of the things, since I do a lot of project-based learning, one of the things I feel my students really excel at is critical thinking skills. because my big thing is, so that didn't really work out the way we wanted it to. What can we do to change it? How can we fix this? And I'm doing summer camps, and my daughter is helping me. She has her own tutoring company, but she's helping me at the summer camps when I have a lot of students. And she said, they're always repeating it, Mom. Well, that didn't work out. So let's try it again and see how we can fix it. Yes, it's really sunk in. That's good. So, and because that's what life is.
Right. Well, and that is a real benefit for kids, because that's a life skill to be able to say, okay, I got knocked on my butt. What am I going to do about this? Am I going to sit here in the dirt, or am I going to get up and figure it out? Right. And because life is going to knock you on your butt, and school is going to do that too. And so you're going to have to figure things out. And we know that as adults, but to have kids learn that at such a young age, that's amazing.
Yes, I'm just so proud of them that they don't give up. I said, okay, that didn't work. What else can we do? And I see that a lot in our STEM activities that we do. And last week we were making a musical instrument with cardboard and rubber bands. And I had a little boy. He worked so hard. He worked and worked and worked and worked. And at the end, it did not work out. And he was so frustrated. And so we used it as a teaching. Yeah. And you know what? You do get frustrated. It's okay to be frustrated. You worked hard. It didn't work out. So let's talk next week about how we can change things. What maybe we should have done instead.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and it is okay to be frustrated. It is okay to be angry or upset about things. And I think sometimes we tend to say things that get kids to feel like maybe that's not okay. But the reality is, it is okay. Take a minute and be upset. And then, okay, now it's time to get up and figure it out. But let's be upset for a little bit and then get out of your system. And then don't get stuck there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've got it. So, okay, this didn't work. I'm always telling them about different people who failed so many times before they succeeded.
Right.
I've got some that are just starting to get interested in Harry Potter. She didn't sell her book to the very first publisher. Can't remember the number, but there was a lot that turned her down. So
it's always the case, isn't it? Okay, so talk to me about what kinds of challenges do you think there are in starting a school or in schooling other people's kids in these small pods and micro schools?
For me, the biggest challenge is marketing. I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't have a clue. And I'm trying to figure it out. I market on social media. I get a few responses. I've found it goes in waves where I'll get a lot of responses and get really excited. And it's just people who actually want me to advertise with them. Okay, that's not going to happen. And for me, that's the big thing, because I would like a few more students. And so marketing, how to reach people. I have a great family who owns a yoga studio, and they'll put my brochures up. They did for summer camp, and I got full. So it's just, I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to marketing.
Well, and I think some of that is trial and error too, figuring out what really works for you in your situation, because it really is very specific to an area.
Yes.
For the most part, especially with STEM in the park. But, the online school may or may not be, but it depends, because every state has different rules. And so they may or may not be able to join your school from somewhere else. So yeah, I could see that being tricky. If you already have students and kids that are looking for this kind of a situation, and then they know other families, then that kind of works out. But it can be absolutely difficult to stay full if you don't already have that going for you, for sure. Right. And figuring out how to reach families and to reach your potential students could certainly be a problem. That's something to consider for sure. So what tips do you have for other teachers who are interested in this kind of schooling, I think, or even parents wanting this kind of help. What would you
Well,
suggest? Let's start with teachers. If what tips do you have for teachers who are interested in this kind of schooling?
for teachers, the big thing is they have to be ready for the amount of work that needs to be put in. This was my first year and I worked, 14-hour days because I have K through 4 and I had to I didn't have any resources. And yes, there are some great teachers on social media groups who are willing to give you, here's what I developed, but I had to find it all that aligned with standards, that still met the needs of my students. I had a great third grade math group that just worked at fourth grade level because math was their thing. And so, making sure I hit everything, and it took a lot of work. I planned everything. It wasn't one of those things, I have no lesson plans for this week. No, because I also on Sunday would schedule the week's, would try to schedule the week's worth of work to be to come up on the right days on Google Classroom. And then you also have to realize you're going to have technical issues. They're going to have technical issues. You kind of got to go with that flow.
Right.
So, in the middle, I would feel so bad for my kids in the middle of a lesson. I'd go out on my computer. And so then I'd have to pull up my phone and rejoin the Zoom lesson. But then I couldn't share certain things. It was just difficult. But, we all learned. Yep, that happens. Okay.
Well, and so I guess the challenges are, obviously technology is always a challenge, and certainly you can do in-person school. That's what I did this year too. But you can do in-person school. I certainly see the benefits of doing multi-age only because then you have families who have several students, and that really is a benefit. And I can see families being very interested in doing that. But then there's also the benefit of doing a single grade, maybe getting other teachers who would do other grades on their own as well, and say, I'm doing second, they're doing third, those kinds of things, because teaching one grade or even two grades is so much easier than having that wide range for sure, because you're really a one-room schoolhouse is the way you're running for it. Yeah.
Yes. And I want to make sure everybody is, hits what they need to hit. That's real, it's my name on the line. So I want to make sure that they get it. So there are those challenges. Those are the things that you have to really be prepared. It's not, I'm going to teach half day and then I'm going to go shopping for the rest of the day. It's not that. It is working.
Right. And if you're looking for an easier way, then this is an audit.
No, it is not.
If you're looking for less work, then this is not it. You have to be really passionate about wanting to give the very best to your students, and knowing that it may take actually a little more work, not less work, in order to be able to do that, at least as you get started. After you get established, I think that it gets a little easier, but it really does take a lot to get something like this going, for sure.
It does. And however, then like at the end of the year, when I asked all my students, so what was your favorite thing? They all said science, which was just great for me, that they just loved science. It wasn't like, oh, science is so boring. Oh, which I always encountered in person. Okay, get out your book, read these pages. We couldn't do it that way anymore. And so, there were hands-on, whether they watched me do a science experiment through Zoom, or we did it at the park where they could see it live and, oh, this is great. And we can discuss all this stuff. And I said, what will you miss this summer? Science.
Well, and I think it forced you out of your comfort zone a little bit too, didn't it? I think that was true of COVID for so many people, that, it's easy to get stuck in your mode of this is what we do and this is how we do it. And having to do things differently, it really does help you reevaluate, what you should keep and what you shouldn't, and ways to teach, for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then for the students, like I said, the big thing was, well, I always tried to also be very flexible with my students. So if I had a student who said, I'm really struggling with this, Mrs. Gatlin, say, okay, I've got 15 minutes before the next, let's go on Zoom and let's figure out what you're struggling with. And
Right.
so I feel I made myself available to them all the time. And so they had that. I tried to keep the camaraderie between our kids there. We would have Friday movie nights through Zoom where we'd all just sit down. We all had our snacks and we'd all show off our snacks, and then we'd all mute ourselves and watch a movie together. And they actually said, are we going to do that during the summer? Well, no, we're not going to do it during the summer. I'm trying to work out this camp situation. So it was just, so they stayed really close, even though they couldn't see each other.
Right. I think it sounds like you created a community too, and that's such an essential piece, and it's really hard to do when you are virtual.
Yes.
Maintain that sense of community, and that's a real benefit for everyone, yourself included, I think, because as teachers, we want to connect with our students. That's an important piece of teaching, is feeling that connection. And I think teaching online for so many people, they didn't feel that connection. That's why it was such a terrible experience, because they did not get that connection.
Yes.
And that's part of our souls as teachers, is to feel connected to our students, for sure. So
Definitely.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I love how you created the sense of community. And now coming up in the next year, you have a whole backlog of stuff you've done for each grade. So certainly there's less planning, and
Yes.
hopefully it will be, going into your second year of doing this, hopefully it will be a
Yes,
little.
that's what I've saved, every single lesson plan. And even lesson planning, I learned as I went. I started out, I would plan it all online. I would have all this, so detailed. And then that took a long time. And each student throughout the year, I always did this. Each student received a planner at the beginning of the week, so they knew what was coming up, and there were links for their meeting, so nobody could ever say, oh, I didn't know how to get on. Click on your planner, it's there. And then as I went, I discovered, I'm sorry.
You did an electronic planner for each student?
Yes. Well, it was, I found on, where did I get this one? Can't remember if it was on, there's a site, trying to think of it, that does free Google Slides. It may have been that one, or it may have been another one that was really comprehensive that I purchased. But so everybody had their planner, and I could assign it through, I put it in the material section just for them. Each one had their own, and I embedded the links in it for everything. So they could see it on Monday, they could download it. I made it come live at like 8 a.m. on Monday, and then they could print it. They could click on the links. And then I learned, this is the learning curve, I used to redo them and assign it. But then I learned when you put it in the materials section, you can just redo theirs every week, and you don't have to go through the whole assigning process, because they can just click on it the next week and it's changed for them because you've shared the link. Something I learned.
Very good.
And so they had that, and I learned a better way of lesson planning that fit my needs. Each teacher has their own way of lesson planning. And while, yes, the other one was so detailed, it took so long, and it didn't need to be so detailed. So then I just went to a notebook where I could write things down, and I have it all. It's actually right here. I have it all tabbed by the different subject areas. And I ended up being able to plan for a month at a time instead of a week at a time that way. And it was just, it worked out better for me. So I have all that.
Yeah, much more efficient, for sure. For sure. It's always good. I know with lesson planning, it's always good to do a bunch all at once than it is to do 1 week at a time, simply because it is much more efficient. and you're already in that mode, your brain's already thinking like that, but also you have all your materials out and you're already planning. And so it's
Yes.
easier to do a longer plan than it is to do the shorter plan for sure. So some things to think about as you're getting started, if this is something that teachers wanted to do, would be to follow all the regulations from your state and county and school district. You'd have to really check into all of that because everywhere is different. And so you want to make sure you're following all of those rules. And you would need to decide if you're opening your own school versus doing essentially homeschooling other people's kids too. And knowing how to market is certainly something, that is beneficial. I mean, if you start out this way with a group of students and that's working out and they're finding you, that's great. But then what are you going to do the next year and the next year? And that's something to think about long term. Is this a long-term plan? Is it a one-year plan? And so if it is something you want to do long-term, knowing how to market becomes certainly an essential piece because you are running a business.
Yes. That's
So
just so important.
yes,
I'm working on that one.
Right. And you're wearing multiple hats. You're not just teacher, you're principal, but you're also, business owner as well. And being able to, wear those hats and all the other millions of hats that teachers wear in addition,
Right.
it really is, something that you need to consider because it is a big job. The first year is always the hardest in doing something like this. But after that, in following years, it is much easier. That is for sure. So having a plan, a scope and sequence that also includes all the standards that need to be taught would be a great way to start. And then obviously, as you said, learning to plan a month in advance was always beneficial because you are maximizing your time. I call it batching. And so you're batching your work and you're doing it in large batches as opposed to 1 week at a time. It would save you a lot of time and energy for sure and free up some of your time because this is a long haul project.
It is. It really is.
Well, honestly, there's so many schooling options out there, and this is such a great option for lots of families and for lots of teachers. And so thank you so much for being here and sharing your journey. I think it's so interesting what you managed to do this last year, and I wish you luck in the rest of this next year. I hope that it goes well and that you continue on this journey. It sounds like you're just loving it.
I am. Thank you very much for having me so I can share that. Honestly, yes, it's a lot of work, but it is great. It really is great.
Absolutely.
So that's it, my teacher friends. We're out of time and I'm out of breath. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked today's episode, I'd love it if you'd go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave a review. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Also, you can continue the conversation online with me in my Facebook group, the Teach Joyfully podcast community, where elementary teachers can connect, get help, and encouragement for all kinds of education and parenting topics. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in today's episode on my website, www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. And remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.